Hello there. So I recently upgraded my camera from the Canon 5D Mark III to the Canon R6. And today I wanted to take you behind the scenes of my thought process, what I looked at when I was looking at these two cameras and comparing them, and ultimately why I made the switch. Now, even if you aren't interested in those two particular camera models, you don't have the Canon 5D Mark III and you have no intention of getting the Canon R6, I still think you'll find this video helpful, because one of the questions I get asked a lot from my students is, how to know when they're ready to upgrade, which camera they should upgrade to. And this will help you by showing you some of the things that you can look at and the questions that you need to ask yourself when you're looking to upgrade or change out your camera. Now, if you're new here, hello, my name's Audrey-Ann from Live Snap Love, where I help you master photography quickly and easily so you can beautifully capture the people and the moments that matter most. Do make sure that you hit the subscription button and the notification bell, and you'll stay in the loop when we release new videos, which is every single week. So the camera that I have at the moment is the Canon 5D Mark III. Now, this was already an upgraded camera. My original camera was the Canon Rebel. I think it was a T3i that I had. And I upgraded to this one when it first came out, which was back in 2012, and I've been shooting with it ever since. And I love this camera, and I have to say, there was very little reason for me to upgrade because I really do love this camera. And even though it is getting on for, I think, maybe 10 years old almost, it didn't really feel like I was shooting with an older camera, and I didn't really feel that I needed to upgrade. This is what I have gone to, which you can see here, which is the Canon R6. Now, the biggest difference between these two is that one is a DSLR and this one is a mirrorless camera. So that was the biggest change between these two cameras. So as I say, I'm going to kind of look at the differences between the two. And this is specifically what I was looking at when I was trying to make a decision between these cameras and whether I wanted to upgrade and whether it would be beneficial. So I was asking myself things like, what are the big differences between my current camera and the R6? I needed to know, would my current lenses still work, or would I have to change them out? Would my current accessories still work, or would I have to pay more for any accessories? And ultimately, the most important question of all is, will this help me take better photos and improve my photography skills? So let's make a start by looking at the big differences between the Canon 5D Mark III and the R6. And again, you can look at these. If you're looking at different cameras, this is ones that you can look at as well and just start to compare the two. So the first one we're going to look at is megapixels. Now, this is actually where the Canon R6 gives you less than my existing camera, the Canon 5D Mark III. So the Canon 5D Mark III has 23 megapixels, whereas the R6 only has 20. Now, I have to say, megapixels isn't that huge a deal for me. Provided you have over 18 megapixels, you're pretty much good to go. So unless you have a really good reason why you want large amount of pixels, for example, you're going to blow up your pictures to really large sizes, then it kind of becomes a little bit of a moot point how much megapixels you have. So I wasn't overly concerned about this. It did give me a little bit of pause. The Canon R5 has more megapixels, and that was something that I did look at. Do I really need to go down the R5 route to get more megapixels? In the end, I decided that it really wasn't that big a deal for me. The type of images that I take, they're going to be put up in homes. They're not going to be in galleries or, on billboards. So it wasn't a deal breaker for me. So for that reason, I was quite happy to stick with the 20 megapixels. The next area I looked at was the viewfinder. Now, when you switch to mirrorless, they have an electronic viewfinder. And actually, I have to say, this is one of the best things about the upgrade. It's something that I really love. When you're shooting with the Canon 5D Mark III, well, a DSLR camera, when you look through the viewfinder, you're just seeing the scene as is. You're not seeing the exposure that you've set into the camera. And this can often mean that you end up taking a picture, you look at the LCD screen on the back and you realize that you're woefully underexposed or overexposed, or you've forgotten to change your settings and you've shot away and then you realize that there's a problem. With the R6, when you look through the viewfinder, you are seeing the differences in exposure. It's quite difficult to get used to begin with, because what you're seeing there is a representation of how it's going to look. So in other words, if I change my aperture or my shutter speed to let in more light, for example, then I actually see that exposure in the viewfinder. So this actually great, takes away a step. So normally I would be, use I would meter, I would get my settings correct, I would look at the back of the screen, make sure that everything was fine, and then carry on shooting. Now I don't have to look at the back of the screen because I'm seeing it all in my viewfinder. It's almost a little bit like editing in camera, because instead of it maybe being a little bit too dark and I have to add a little bit of exposure in editing, I can see that when I'm shooting and I add that little bit of extra exposure, or the other way around, right there in the viewfinder. So that was a big one. Really, I do enjoy using that at the moment. We'll see how it goes. I'm very new to this camera, it has to be said, so I'm still finding my way around it. So this is more my thought process when I was looking to buy it rather than my thoughts on it just now. We'll get into that in another video though. The next area is focus points, because the Canon 5D Mark III has 61 focus points, where the R6 has a whopping 6,072. Now, I have to say, once again, this wasn't a major deal breaker for me with regard to the number of focus points, because though that 6072 sounds quite impressive, you're not going to use all 6,072. So you will be changing that to have less. But what I do really like about this, where there's this difference, is that the Canon 5D Mark III, all your focus points are kind of in the center of the frame. They don't go all the way to the edges, where with the R6 they do. This means I don't have to use focus recompose at all, because there's no need to do it. Sometimes, when you're shooting with smaller number of focus points, you really don't have any choice but to use focus recompose, which is when you use a focus point to focus your image, and then you move the camera slightly in order to get the composition that you want. And you don't have to do this with the R6 at all, because the focus points go right to the edge of the screen. So the next one is the focusing system. So the Canon 5D Mark III has a standard focusing system. You select your focus points using, the dial and the control button at the back. With the R6, you actually have touch autofocus. Now, this is taking me a little bit of time to get used to, but you can still set your focus point by using the dials, the dial and the toggle at the back, but you can also simply touch the screen where you want your focus to go. And this is taking a little bit of getting used to, because I certainly wouldn't ever hold my camera out like that and select the focus point, because I want to have the camera to my eye. It's very unsteady holding your camera like that. But you can actually select the focus point while you have your camera to the eye, and you can see it through the viewfinder using the touch screen. It's something that I'm getting used to. I will update you all on that and how that goes, but it's certainly a difference between the two. But to me, that's an improvement. So I can definitely see situations where that would be very, very useful, very helpful. So for me, that is an upgrade. It's something that I feel that I am really interested in having. I think it will make life easier when shooting. So although I'm still getting used to it and I can't say that I've mastered it yet, it's something that definitely was really interesting to me when I was looking at this camera. The next one was the ISO range. The R6 has a slightly higher ISO range than the Canon 5D Mark III. This wasn't a deal breaker for me. It's not something that I was overly concerned about, but it's something to be aware that is there. It's good to know. The next one was image stabilization. Now, image stabilization is helpful if you shoot stationary subjects and you can turn on the image stabilization. And what this does is it compacts any camera shape. So if I pick this up and you have a heavy lens on particularly, just you holding the camera can be enough to add motion blur to the image. It's your motion. And you have to use a high enough shutter speed to combat the weight of the lens and the camera body that you're holding. But what you can do with image stabilization is you turn that on and it combats your shake. So therefore you can use lower shutter speed than you might be able to normally. Not, again, a huge deal breaker for me. Interesting, nice to have, not a deal breaker. And the reason for that is I shoot moving subjects. And I also always have to have a high enough shutter speed to capture their motion. But image stabilization doesn't help with that. So for me, not a deal breaker. Again, it's interesting. It's kind of nice to have, not something that I would have raced out and got the camera for. The next thing that is different is the articulated screen. So the Canon 5D has a screen there. I can't move it. I can't do anything with it. The R6 does have an articulated screen, so it pops out and you can kind of twist that around. You can have that there and you can have it there. So you can really play around with the screen. Again, not something that I would often use, but I have been playing with it, and it can lead to getting some interesting shots, particularly if you're maybe shooting something on the ground. Normally I'd have to get right down onto the ground so I could see what I was doing. I can kind of put the camera down and see what I'm doing with the screen. So again, not a deal breaker, but something that is nice to have. So the next one is the frames per second. So the Canon 5D Mark III has 6 frames per second, whereas the R6 has 12 frames per second, 20 electronic. Now your frames per second is essentially how many shots your camera can take in 1 second. So if you're using something like burst mode, that's how many pictures it can take in 1 second. So you can imagine if you're getting 12 in 1 second, that is really, really fast. Again, not so much of an importance to me. I think if you shot something like motorsports, that would be really important to you. But for moving children, it can be good to go faster. Never really noticed a problem with my 6 frames per second, though, it has to be said. So whilst it is an improvement, again, not something that I would have rushed out by the camera for. The next one, nothing of any interest to me, I'm just putting it out there, is a video resolution because you can shoot in 4K on the R6. I don't shoot video. This isn't of any real interest to me. It is an upgrade. I ever do shoot video. It's really nice to have, but not something that's a major importance to me. If video had been of importance to me, I would have actually gone for the R5 because the video specs on that camera are amazing. Far better than the R6. So if you're a video person, I would go with the R5 even though it's more expensive. And the next one is the size and the weight. Now, I don't think there is a big difference in the size and weight, but when you actually put the lenses on, it doesn't feel all that different. So this is my Canon 5D Mark III, and this, can I pick it up one-handed? Let's see, is the R6. So you can definitely see a difference in the size and the weight, but I have to say, once you add on the adapter and the lens, I don't notice a huge amount of difference. The only thing I would say is the R6, when I have my 50mm lens on, which is my smallest, most compact lens, I would be more throw in your bag type, but it's not been, I really wanted the less size and the less weight because sometimes I feel like there's a great big heavy camera around my neck, but actually when I've been out shooting, I haven't really noticed a difference. So it was something I thought I would be really keen on having, turned out not to make that much difference to me. So the last one I'm going to look at is memory slots. Now, the Canon 5D Mark III takes on the CF and the SD cards, whereas the R6 is SD only. So for those of you that don't know, this is an SD card, this is a CF card, and I have lots of these, and I don't have any of these, or I didn't have any of these. So it's not that important. You can get really fast cards these days, the SD cards. So wasn't overly concerned about this one. but it was an extra expense because I had to go and buy a couple of these cards because I use these. So not a great deal in terms of shooting and that kind of thing, but it did have an impact on how much I was actually going to have to spend, because I do think you need to look at what additional expenses you are going to have when you buy a new camera. So that's definitely something that is important. So let's look at some of the questions I wanted answered before I upgraded. And the first one was, will my existing lenses still work? I have a suite of lenses, more lenses than I know what to do with. I have been shooting for a long time, just before anyone thinks you need to go and run out and buy all these lenses. But I have a lot, and they are all Canon lenses, and I thought they're different basically. So your mirrorless cameras, they have an RF adapter, they have an RF mount, I should say. So you buy RF lenses for it, and the lenses are really expensive, and I thought I can't afford to go and buy new lenses as well. That's just not going to work. But you do actually get an adapter. So these are EF mount lenses, and you get an adapter that goes from RF to EF so that your existing lenses work. It was an additional expense. Trying to remember, I think it was about $150. I could be wrong there. And you just attach that to your camera, and then you can attach any of your lenses to it. So it was an additional expense. It had to be done. I knew that if I bought the camera, I would have to use my existing lenses with it, and I would need to buy this adapter. My concern had been as to whether it would still be as sharp and as good by having an adapter there, because my lenses are really nice. I love my lenses. And actually it's been no bother at all. You couldn't really tell that there is a mount there. They work beautifully. I had a couple of problems originally with my Sigma lens. It's my only off-brand one, and I don't know if that's what originally caused the problem, but all fixed now, I'm pleased to say. So all my lenses work now with that adapter. The second question was, will my existing accessories still work? So I have a number of accessories, so things like my cards and also my speed light. And the good news is, apart from the cards, everything else works. So this was only one that doesn't work. So my speed light and everything is still fine, still good to go. So it meant that the only real expense I had in swapping over that wasn't just the camera was buying a couple of these, and it was also buying that lens adapter, the RF to the EF mount. And the third question was, do I really need it, or do I just want it? Because the one thing I say to every single student who asks the question, should I upgrade? What should I upgrade to? My question is, what is holding you back with your existing camera? And we did a video really recently, a couple of weeks ago, on growing your lens collection, and I asked the same question there. What is it that's holding you back, and what do you want this piece of equipment? Why are you buying it? What is it going to improve in your photos? So the question for me then also was that same. Do I really need it? Do I just want it? And is it going to improve my photography? So the answer to that question, surprisingly, since I'm standing here with an R6 in my hand, is that I don't really need it. It's not going to improve my photography. And that's the honest truth. I don't really need it. I just wanted it. I don't need it. This Canon 5D is capable of taking amazing images. And I know because I love some of the images that I've taken with it. I also know that it is nowhere near out of date or defunct. It is, in terms of technology, moves so quickly that we'll never hope to stay on top of it unless we're happy to spend thousands of dollars every couple of years. But I get sharp, well exposed images with this camera. There's absolutely nothing stopping me from taking amazing images with this camera, not a thing. So you might well be asking, why did I bother to upgrade to the R6? And the truth of the matter is I upgraded because in addition to being a photographer, I am a photography educator. So I have my Auto to Awesome program. We have thousands of students in that program. And I felt it's really important for me to be up to date with the advances in cameras. So there is no doubt about it that the R6 has got more advanced features than the Canon 5D Mark III. Things like the touch autofocus. It has some other features as well where it can automatically focus on eyes and faces, automatically detect them, I should say, and then maintain focus on them. I don't particularly like that feature. I probably won't be using it. I'll certainly try it. But I need to be aware of these advances and these different ways of shooting, and being able to see the exposure through the viewfinder. I need to be aware of that so that I can cover that with students who come into my course with a mirrorless camera. So I'm not advising them on something that I haven't shot with myself. So it's really important to me that I have continue to understand the advances and the different cameras out there so that I can advise my students accordingly. So in other words, it was really all your fault if you're a student of mine, and I have told my husband that it was all your fault as well. So that's why I upgraded between the Canon 5D Mark III. As I say, there are a number of features on this R6. I'm so happy I got it. I love being able to see the exposure through the viewfinder. I know I'm going to love that touch autofocus when I start using it. So there's so much things to like about it, and I will definitely be creating another video where I go through some of the features in more depth that I love. And to that end, if you have any questions about the R6 or mirrorless in general or switching between the two, please do let me know them in the comments, and that way I will answer them in upcoming videos. But certainly I hope you enjoyed this. I hope that it gave you a peek into the thought process of looking at different cameras. And that all important question is, do you really need it or do you just want it? My advice is, for most people, if you don't need it, it's not going to improve your photography, or you can't answer the question how it's going to improve your photography, leave it on the shelf for now. Go and learn the camera that you have, because even your entry-level camera will allow you to take amazing images if you know how to use it. Only upgrade and spend that money when you can say, this camera is going to help me do this. And when you can answer that and you know what you want, go forth and upgrade. As I say, genuinely, the reason I upgraded was for my students, to make sure that I am fully up to date with everything that is happening in the world of technology and cameras. So that's it for me today. Don't forget to leave those questions if you have some, and don't forget to subscribe, hit the notification bell as well, and you'll be notified of any upcoming videos. So that's it from me today. This was a long one. I will see you again soon. Bye for now.